Okay, so let's get started building our web application. Now we're going to need some software to do this. And first of all, I've come into microsoft.com/net. You can get to here simply by typing in .net into your browser. And this will take us to the microsoft.com/net page. And this is where we can download the ASP.NET Core software development kit and also the runtime as well. So come to this site first of all and click on the Get Started. And this will give us some options to install the SDK and create our application. Now, initially we're just simply getting the software. So we can click on .NET SDK, but first of all, let me just show you the downloads part of this. And if I come inside here, then I'll just scroll down a little bit to the other downloads and click to see all downloads. And what we're going to do is download the 2.1 SDK. And when we download the SDK, we also get the runtime. So we don't need both of these, just one or the other, because the SDK also includes this. Now, I'm not totally convinced on Microsoft's numbering convention here, because the 2.0 SDK is version 2.1200 of the SDK, and the 2.0 runtime is version 2.08. And the 2.1 SDK is version 2.1.300, which is the 2.1.0 runtime. So slightly weird naming convention, but we can go back to the starting page, and all we want to do is just click on the download .NET SDK. I've already got this installed on my computer, but it's just simply a case of clicking on the button. It will download. It'll take a little while, and then just follow the installation for your particular operating system. I'm sure this is something you've done before, so I'm not going to insult your intelligence by demonstrating this. But once you've got it installed, just go into your terminal, and you should find that you have access to the .NET commands. And if I just type in .NET -- version, then we see which version of the .NET SDK that I'm using. And this is 2.1300, which matches what we saw. Now, another thing that we need to install is something called Node.js. And if we just type in Node.js into Google search and just go to nodejs.org, then we also need to get this. And Node.js is a JavaScript runtime, and we need this for developing our Angular application. Now, Angular is a client-side framework, and Node.js is a server-side JavaScript engine. So why do we need Node.js? Well, first of all, Node comes with a package manager called NPM. And when we're getting Angular or we're installing JavaScript packages, then NPM is a package ecosystem where we can simply go and get them from. And it's going to manage these packages and also grab any dependencies that these packages need at the same time. And it would be very difficult to manage without it. There are alternatives to NPM, but we do need Node.js regardless for Angular, because Angular also comes with a development server which uses Node.js in the background. So it's not incredibly important to worry about what Node.js does, but it is important for us to download it and install it so that we can make use of tools such as the Angular command line interface and other packages that we're going to need for building our application. So go ahead and grab the latest long-term support option, which is 8.11.2 at the time of recording, and go ahead and install that. Again, I presume that you'll be comfortable with installing software, and once you've got it installed, then if you go to your command prompt or terminal window, then if you just type in node -- version, this will give you the version that's installed and that your computer is using. In my case, version 8.11.2. Once you have Node installed, then you'll also have access to NPM. So if you just double check the version that's installed here as well, if you've gone ahead and grabbed the latest version, then you'll have 6.1.0 or higher. Now, if you've already got Node installed and it's a slightly older version, that should be okay, as long as it's version 6.9.0 or higher. And the version of NPM needs to be at least version 3. What we also need is a code editor. And the one that I'm using in all of the demos on this course, I'll just type in VS Code into the search bar, is Visual Studio Code. And this is from Microsoft. It's an open source code editor, and it's available for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And it's pretty much the same experience on any of those operating systems. It's very lightweight, it's very good, and whilst it is a code editor rather than a full IDE or integrated development environment, with the addition of extensions, we can turn this into something very similar to an IDE. So I'd recommend getting the latest version of this, of VS Code, and downloading and installing this on your computer. Now, it's not the only IDE or code editor you could use to do this course. I have had questions in the past around Visual Studio, the full-blown version, as an alternative. And sure, it's possible to use Visual Studio, but it might be a bit heavy-handed for what we're doing on this course. We're using some very lightweight frameworks in terms of .NET Core and Angular. And Visual Studio, the full version, is a full, heavy, integrated development environment. And it's been a while since I've used it now, because I much prefer the lightweight code editors to something like that. But you are free to use whichever code editor you prefer. You are limited on options with .NET Core though. You're limited to Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, or there's an IDE from JetBrains called Rider, which does have full support for C#, or .NET Core at least anyway. For Angular and JavaScript, your choices are much wider. There's all sorts of JavaScript code editors that are all really good, but Visual Studio Code kind of provides a balance between being able to edit all of our code within a single code editor versus juggling different code editors for different reasons. So for that reason, I'm sticking with VS Code on this course. It's got excellent support for C#, and it has excellent support for TypeScript as well. So while we're downloading software, let's get another couple of pieces of software that we need. We won't necessarily use straight away, but so let's get one called Postman. And what we're looking for is getpostman.com, the API development environment. And this will allow us to query our API without needing to write any client-side code. So it's very useful when testing a web API, which is what we're building on this course. So go ahead, download this one and install it as well. Although, like I say, we're not going to be using it immediately. And another tool that we're going to use, or would be useful to get, is DB Browser for SQLite. And if you grab this one from SQLitebrowser.org and just download either the Windows executable, the Mac DMG file, or if you're on a Linux machine, then hopefully you know what to do with a tar.gz file. I'm not a Linux guy. So do grab this and install it as well, and we'll be using this to interrogate our database. The database we'll be using for development is SQLite. We will look at options later on to swap this for something else, but for development, SQLite is a really quick and easy one to get up and running without needing to install a full-on database server. But this software, SQLite Database Browser, will allow us to take a look at what's inside our database. Just go ahead and install this one as well. Next up, we're actually going to start creating our projects for our application.